Have you ever wondered if the universe is just a random explosion of chaos, or if there's something much deeper, much more deliberate behind everything? Have you paused, not just to look at the stars, but to question why there's anything at all? Not just how things work, but why they work. Not just what's out there, but who or what made it all possible. In a world where certainty often hides behind a screen and answers are delivered in sound bites, there's a deeper hunger emerging. A hunger to understand, not just to know, but to know what matters. Not just to believe, but to believe for a reason. This video isn't about forcing conclusions or preaching a system. It's not about mocking doubt or glorifying faith blindly. No, it's about stopping for a moment in this fast-paced, skeptical world and daring to ask the questions most people are too afraid to confront. We'll explore the things that science can measure, but not explain the origins that textbooks outline, but never really answer. We'll look at reason, logic, morality, and design, and ask if they're truly products of blind chance or evidence of something or someone greater. If you've ever whispered into the silence, "Is this all there is?" Or if you felt the gnawing tug of purpose when everything around you claims meaning is an illusion, then this is your moment. Grab your coffee and lean in. Let's begin the journey by asking what few dare to ask. Welcome to Unleash Facts, the place where history secrets, unsolved mysteries, and mind-blowing truths come to light. Take a moment and think about this. The universe didn't just appear, it came built with specific settings. Settings so precise, it's almost impossible to believe they were the result of pure chance. Let's start with gravity. Scientists say if the force of gravity were changed by just one part in a number with 60 zeros, that's 1 in 10 to the 60th power, then the universe as we know it couldn't exist. No stars, no planets, no life. But it gets even crazier. The cosmological constant, which controls how fast the universe is expanding, is so fine-tuned that if it were off by one part in a number with 120 zeros, yes, 1 in 10 to the 120th power, the universe would either collapse in on itself or expand too quickly for anything to form. And it's not just those two. The strength of the strong nuclear force, the electromagnetic force, the mass of protons and electrons, all of them have to be just right. Change any one of them, even slightly, and life would be impossible. So here's the big question. How do atheists explain that? Some say it's just luck. But luck doesn't fine-tune universal constants with unimaginable precision. That's like saying you won the lottery, not once, but every single day for the rest of your life, with numbers you didn't even pick. Others bring up the multiverse theory. They say there are endless universes, and we just happen to live in the one that got it right. But there's no evidence for that. None. It's not science, it's storytelling. And even if infinite universes did exist, you still have to ask, who or what made the multiverse rules? Let's make it simple. Imagine walking into a room and seeing a massive control panel with hundreds of knobs and switches. Every single one is tuned perfectly. Just one mistake and everything blows up, but it's all running smoothly. Would you seriously believe it all landed that way on its own? Because that's exactly what we're seeing in our universe. A system so delicate, so perfectly balanced, that calling it an accident feels like intellectual suicide. Atheism has no answer for this level of order. But if there was a mind behind it, one powerful enough to create, and intelligent enough to program life into existence, then it makes perfect sense. So let's ask honestly, does a system this precise come from random explosions? Or does it look more like someone wanted us here? If you're ready to debate this respectfully, you're more than welcome to join the conversation. But if you're just here to mock or throw insults, this probably isn't the place for you. Let's start with a question so simple, so ancient, and yet so disturbing in its implications. Why does anything exist at all? No, not how things exist. That's the job of physics. Not when they began. That's astronomy's concern. But why? Why does reality exist instead of nothing at all? Think about it. Nothingness doesn't need help. It doesn't need a cause. It's the default state. Nothing is easier than something. Nothing doesn't weigh anything, doesn't take up space, and doesn't ask for permission. And yet, here we are. You, me, time, space, consciousness, all of it. Now here's the mind bender. If the universe had a beginning, and according to the most respected cosmologists, it did, then it must have had a cause. The Big Bang wasn't just an explosion. It was the beginning of time, space, matter, and energy, all rolled into one incomprehensible event from a point of what? Stephen Hawking once described the universe as having no boundary, like the surface of the Earth, but in 4 dimensions. Yet even he had to wrestle with the unsettling question. What caused that first quantum fluctuation? What pushed nothing into something? Atheists often turn to brute facts or say the universe just is. But does that really satisfy the hunger for truth? That's not an explanation, that's a surrender. It's like stopping the movie right before the climax and pretending the ending doesn't matter. And let's be clear, invoking a multiverse doesn't help. That just pushes the question back one level. Why does the multiverse exist? Why are there any laws at all, mathematical, physical, or logical, that allow for anything to appear, evolve, and eventually become conscious? Philosophers like Leibniz argued that the most reasonable answer to why anything exists is that something necessary exists. Something that must exist. Something that isn't dependent, limited, or temporary. But if such a necessary being exists, then what kind of being are we talking about? Random forces don't birth meaning. Blind energy doesn't write laws. Explosions don't design DNA. So here's the first challenge. Can something come from absolutely nothing, no energy, no laws, no time, no space? If not, then something eternal must have existed. And if that something isn't the universe, what is it? Let's shift gears. Not to galaxies or black holes, but to something much closer. Something inside you right now. Consciousness. Not your brain, your mind. The you behind your eyes. The part that thinks, dreams, imagines, regrets, hopes, and fears. The part that knows it exists and wonders why. Ask yourself this. How does a lump of gray matter made of neurons and chemicals suddenly give rise to thoughts, to self-awareness, to morality, to you? Materialists claim your mind is just an illusion, that you're nothing more than biological machinery, that free will is a myth. But if that's true, why do we act like we have choices? Why do we hold people accountable for crimes or praise them for courage? Why do we sacrifice for others, fall in love, create art, or even question our own existence? Here's what makes atheists uneasy. No one has a working theory of consciousness. Not physicists, not neuroscientists, not philosophers. There's not even a consensus on what consciousness is, let alone how it arises from matter. Sir Roger Penrose, a physicist who worked with Stephen Hawking, flat out rejected the idea that consciousness could be explained by standard physics. He believed the human mind operates on principles that go beyond what we currently understand. If the mind is just the brain, then every thought you have is the product of neurons firing in predetermined patterns, which means your beliefs, including your atheism, aren't reasoned conclusions. They're just the outcome of chemical reactions you never chose. And if that's true, why trust them? You can't say humans are just meat machines and then expect rational debate. You can't say we're purely physical and then talk about human rights, justice, love, or beauty as if they matter. Those things don't exist in atoms. You can't measure morality in a test tube. But if consciousness is real, if the mind is something more than matter, then we're not just highly evolved apes. We're not accidents, we're intentional. So here's the question. Where does this awareness come from? Why can we reason about our own reasoning? And if the universe was born from nothing and guided by no one, why did it create something that can ask why? So if our consciousness isn't just the side effect of firing neurons, if there's something more to the mind than matter, then we have to ask another question. Why can we reason at all? Because consciousness by itself isn't enough. Think about it. Being aware is one thing, but being able to think logically, to form arguments, to spot contradictions, to solve equations, to ask deep questions about the universe, that's something else entirely. Where does that ability come from? Atheism tells us we're just evolved apes with lucky brains. But let's be honest, can blind, mindless evolution produce the ability to understand advanced mathematics? To write symphonies? To build spacecraft that land on distant planets? Random mutations and natural selection care about one thing: survival. Not truth, not beauty, not rational consistency. Yet here we are, asking questions about quantum mechanics and metaphysics. That's not just odd, that's extraordinary. Logic and reason are not physical. You can't touch logic. You can't weigh a syllogism. But logic governs every thought we have. Every law of nature we uncover is written in the language of order. So why does the universe make sense? Why does math describe the physical world so perfectly? Why do the laws of physics follow elegant equations? Why does cause and effect even exist? Albert Einstein once said, "The most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible." If we were just chemical reactions in a meat computer, there's no reason to trust any of our thoughts. They're not chosen, they're triggered. If your thoughts are the product of random evolution, why assume they're true and not just useful illusions? You see, atheism depends on reason, but under its own system, it undermines it. Because if logic, math, and truth are real, immaterial, and universal, then they point to something greater. Something that isn't physical, but that exists everywhere. Something that grounds reality itself. And once you admit that, you're no longer standing on atheism. Because pure matter can't explain minds, and chaos can't explain order. Which leads us to the next unavoidable question. If we can reason, and reason leads us to right and wrong, then where does morality come from? Let's push even deeper into a realm every human wrestles with, no matter what they believe. Right and wrong, good and evil, justice and cruelty. We all feel it. Deep inside, there's a line we don't want crossed. Torturing a child for fun? Evil. Genocide? Evil. Helping the poor? Noble. Risking your life for a stranger? Heroic. But pause for a second. Where does that feeling come from? Why do we care? And if we're just atoms bouncing around in a cold, indifferent universe, why would any of this matter? Atheists often argue that morality is a human invention, a survival strategy shaped by evolution. But evolution doesn't care about good or evil. It only cares about survival. There's no odd in biology, just instincts. So let's get brutally honest. If morality is subjective, just a matter of taste, then the Holocaust wasn't wrong. It was just something a group of humans didn't like. Slavery wasn't evil. It was just outdated. And human rights? Just convenient stories we tell ourselves. Are you comfortable with that? Richard Dawkins, one of the most well-known atheists, famously said, "The universe we observe has no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good nothing, but blind, pitiless indifference." But we don't live like that's true. We cry out against injustice. We grieve for victims. We praise courage. We protest cruelty. Not because it's useful, but because it's right. C.S. Lewis, a former atheist, pointed out that when he was an unbeliever, his argument against God was that the world was so cruel and unjust. But then he asked himself, where had I got this idea of just and unjust? He realized that by judging the world as wrong, he was using a moral standard he couldn't explain. And if there's a real standard one that applies to everyone, everywhere, no matter the time or culture, Then where did it come from? Laws imply a lawgiver. If God doesn't exist, there is no objective morality, only preferences and power. But if good and evil are real, not illusions, then there must be something beyond human minds, something that defines what good is. So here's the challenge. If you say murder is wrong, not just your opinion, but truly wrong, then you've already stepped into moral territory atheism can't explain. And if there's a moral law, what kind of being writes it on the human heart? We've looked at existence. We've looked at fine-tuning consciousness, morality, and now we reach the ultimate crossroads, the origin of everything. Where did it all truly begin? Not just the stars and galaxies, but matter itself, space itself, the laws that govern it all, and the very fabric of time. According to modern science, the universe exploded into existence about 13.8 billion years ago in an event we call the Big Bang. But here's the part that rarely gets attention. Before the Big Bang, there was nothing. No space, no time, no matter, not even vacuum, nothing. So what caused the Big Bang? What set it off? Some physicists suggest quantum fluctuations. But fluctuations require time. They require a space to occur in. They depend on laws, and laws don't just pop into existence. They have to be written. So who or what wrote the laws of physics before physics existed? At this point, the atheist is cornered. They have to admit one of two things. Either the universe came from absolutely nothing, no cause, no reason, no mind, or there was something outside of time and space, something eternal, immaterial, uncaused. Sound familiar? And that's not just philosophy, it's science. The Borde-Guth-Vilenkin theorem, a respected result in modern cosmology, states that any universe that has been expanding throughout its history must have a beginning, which means the multiverse, if it even exists, must also have a beginning. Even Alexander Vilenkin, one of the theorem's authors and not a religious man, said, "All the evidence we have says that the universe had a beginning, and if the universe had a beginning, it had a cause. And causes imply intention, purpose, intelligence. Now think about creation itself. DNA is a language, not metaphorically literally, a four-letter code that builds life from scratch. Just one human cell contains more information than a massive encyclopedia set. If you found a book on the ground, would you ever assume it wrote itself? So why do we believe the most complex code we've ever seen somehow appeared by chance? When we see information, we assume intelligence. When we see laws, we assume a lawgiver. When we see order, we assume design. So let's ask it plainly. If the universe looks designed, if consciousness defies material explanation, if morality points to something higher, if something cannot come from nothing, then what's the more reasonable conclusion? That this all came from randomness and chaos? Or from a mind far greater than ours, one that existed before time, shaped the laws, planted morality, sparked consciousness, and called everything into being? The universe isn't silent. It's whispering. Not just how we got here, but why. If you're ready to debate this respectfully, you're more than welcome to join the conversation. But if you're just here to mock or throw insults, this probably isn't the place for you. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.